apparently my time is already, no, maybe there is a mistake. I hope so. Technology sometimes doesn't help. So thank you for being here. I know that we are all rather tired. It has been a very intensive, exciting, and I would say, in a way, revolutionary week for all of us. I think that we arrived here with our ideas, background, and I hope, at least this has been my experience, that in meeting all of you, in being here, teaching and listening to, I have changed some of my ideas. And I think that changing is kind of crucial step in the Anthropocene. Now, we need to change. And so I believe that we are on the right track here. So I don't want to to waste too much of your time. Just a few very quick word about this participatory governance topic. The Anthropocene is a call to arm. Facing global ecological crisis, humans must act. And strongly enough, in this time, we are having some kind of Leninist coming back to the basic question: what should be done? Well, according to somebody, including myself, maybe this question is a little bit not the best one. We might ask rather, instead of asking what, we might want to ask how. How should we decide what to do? And how should we do what we decide to do? In the Anthropocene, there is an overlapping, with the so-called globalization and the Anthropocene, and both conditions challenge the usual ways in which we think about what is political and how to act the political in this world. And there is a huge, raising of new non-elected bodies and so on. And also a very huge crisis of representative democracy, In the face of all this, participatory whatever, participatory research, democracy, participatory everything, seems to be the answer. So I am curious to listen to our distinguished panelists, what they think about this, because sometimes I wonder, is this participatory democracy actually what will enable us for change, or it's just a way to governmentalize, recalcitrant subjects, to actually include everybody in a huge governmental project? So I am going to present our panelists. First of all, Stella Veciana. She's an artist. She's the founder of the research art platform at the Federation of German Scientists and in Berlin, and I think that she has been crucial, instrumental in putting together civil society organization and scientists and researchers in trying to implement, a more democratic participatory process in research strategies and policies. Then we will have Tobias Oning, architect from the Academy of Fine Arts in Nuremberg. And finally, I would like to introduce you Christopher Brick. She has not been with us all along our campus, so we are very grateful that she is now here to help us to understand, also from kind of outside respect to our own curriculum, what is thoughts about participatory governance. Christoph works for the German Agency for International Cooperations, right? So, Stella.
So, thank you very much for your introduction. I hope you hear me well. Okay. So here we are again. Now somewhere in the orbit, with a common view on the Earth's surface, and maybe with a common sense of concern and desire for taking care and of shaping the Anthropocene curriculum. So first, I will talk about the processes of building perspectives at the campus, and more particularly on how these viewpoints evolved around the question of how participatory can participatory governance be. And further on, I will present my own perspectives on this wording and my own practice. So we see here an image of the NASA that is composed with a lot of images, participatory action of a lot of people all over the world in a CISIS project. So what is participative governance all about? It has been a concept that has been become increasingly prominent, but it's also controversial. It has been discussed a lot. If it's beneficial or really detrimental to democracy. So let me quote a definition of the Institute of Development Studies, what participative governance means. It focuses on deepening democratic engagement through the participation of citizens in the processes of governance with the state. The idea is that citizens should play more direct roles in public decisions making, or at least engage more deeply with political issues. So participatory governance relates to the political dimension of knowledge in the Anthropocene. As Bernd Scherer said, all knowledge has a political dimension, referring to the Anthropocene as a political statement that leads us to the necessity of new political and social action. The Anthropocene as a term is already being used by the scientific advisory public bodies, as in 2011 by the report of the German Scientific Advisory Council on Global Change, WBGU, and it refers to the Anthropocene as a fundamental political field of action, which makes a transformation toward a climate-friendly and sustainable society very urgent. So that would be the German view on it. So during the Anthropocene campus, different aspects of the relation of the Anthropocene have been discussed in different seminars, and a specific transversal concept came up, and I'm quoting here, that is the concept of transversal terms and conceptual migrations. I found quite interesting, this terminology. And it was raised by analyzing, for instance, the meaning of governance in different contexts. In the seminar Disciplinarities, that was part of the connecting dimension, the concept of governance was raised within the case of study of climate engineering. Which technologies are discussed in climate engineering and who is going to decide on its implementation? And how knowledge is made more visible and accountable to support science policymaking. So this last question is closely linked to the dimension of representing, and was discussed in the seminar Slow Media from the perspective of how to link head, hands, and heart in our communication practices. How do we implement the knowledge through collective experiments that address political issues linking all stakeholders? And this question, again, relates to the dimension of claiming. More specifically, there was a very intense debate in the seminar in geopolitics that has been also addressed in the agency panel now, about the concept of activism and its conceptual migrations, how the term of activism has been translated and how it has evolved in different countries. And this question gave rise to other conceptual migrations, as the notion of activism related to proactivism, referring to the conceptual transfer from the political to the entrepreneurial context. So all this led to problematize the role of civil society organizations in politics. How does activism, governance, and participation relate to each other? Within this context, Ariel Weisman made a very thought-provoking, I think, comment, stressing the issue of intrinsic problematic of NGOs activism by being constrained to a permanent restlessness due to the problematic of their funding conditions. But more importantly, he referred to the irresolvable nature of the claims, for instance, for justice, that can be defined conceptually but not be achieved on the when they become materially articulated as political claims, they hold always the contradiction of asking for the unachievable and the achievable on the same time. So how can this double nature of claiming be related to participative governance? Let me introduce you with the following proposition of rethinking shared spaces of encounter, raising the question of us and new approaches of creating a connectedness between us, and try to address the question of how we share knowledge and how we integrate it into a responsibility-driven collective action. This takes me to relate the concept of participative governance to aesthetics. The question that I try to address from the artistic research practice are linked to questions as, how do we apply participative governance in the Anthropocene, introducing more participative practices and structures, for instance, in the scientific system, questioning what we are doing here, questioning our conference systems, our practices where we share, where we meet, where we have exchange. And also, how do we advise policy councils, how we get more introduced in the structure of policy making. So, trying to address these questions, I developed in collaboration with Dan Norton the Challenge Yes or Need platform, a platform that connects specialist knowledge from a continuous series of transdisciplinary conferences. Art installations are used to bridge these conferences and present concepts that yeah, I'm sorry you cannot see, but it's like here we are trying to discuss several concepts. In this discussion platform, we also discuss different terms that are transversal and that can be selected. And in this process of linking and mixing, there is a new way of trying to connect transversal terms. And one of the main elements of this Challenge Yes Need project is a growing archive of video interviews that are presented using an interactive software. So keywords are transversally used to present each interview sequence that can be accessed directly with this Dropbox menu. And so similar themes and reference from specialists can be compared and contrasted. And the knowledge gets locked in long narratives, can be easily identified, selected, and mixed. What we are trying to do here also. So this artistic approach allows viewers to rapidly synthesize alternative propositions by mixing expert opinion. And this mix offers a manner to bring the inevitably defended expert opinion into play within an undefended space. So, what does it mean for the Anthropocene curriculum? In which way does participative governance matter at all? So I think that participative governance within the Anthropocene implies a radical openness fostered by transdisciplinary, intercultural, and sustainability-oriented research to explore deeper concerns related to international conflicts, to democracy and justice. Participative governance also gives the opportunity to reframe and cross-perspective processes of transformation. Participative governance can improve civic skills and social well-being, but there are, of course, questions related to the impact and to the effectiveness that have to be questioned, and they should be addressed by the Anthropocene. And I think also participative governance raises the fundamental question of a hybrid profile, how Roger Malina calls it. And I think that concluding the Anthropocene campus has contributed significantly in stimulating this hybridization, bringing together passionate scientists with analytical artists that, in my opinion, lead to transform our self-perceptions. And here I just want to mention the proposal that was raised during the campus to conceive ourselves as indigenous. getting beyond the excluding use of terminologies and to focus more on our common concerns about the Earth by finding new ways of how we want to live together by shaping a participative governance in terms of a public interest that is beneficial for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and I'm sorry if it's not such a nice job to do the moderator because you have to stop people that are saying very interesting things. Thank you so much for being also on time, and please, it's now Tobias. You have your microphone. Right.
Okay. I had the pleasure the last 2 days to be part of the seminar Anthropogenic Landscape. And as we just finished last afternoon, I'm still like thinking in all the things that we have been talking about and that arise from that seminar. So it was kind of difficult to do the switch and maybe to talk about an outcome and in relation to that term that we are discussing right now. So I more or less decided to step back as far as I can to introduce you into what we actually did or the case study that we selected for our seminar. And then in the end to ask you a question that I think somehow was discussed very intense at the end of the seminar. And I think this question was somehow driven by, or from the background driven by the question for participatory governance in a way. So what we see here is a picture of the Berlin district of Lichtenberg before the industrialization. And that was the place that we went to on Thursday. You see here a picture from the time of the GDR, so we are in East Berlin, a city district which is characterized by leftovers of the 19th century's buildings, but also by the huge housing that was done by the GDR. And the site we focused on is an industrial area which was once occupied by an enterprise called VEB Elektrokohle Lichtenberg, which actually means this was a people-owned enterprise there. Part of the workers there in this enterprise was a huge amount of people that came from North Vietnam to East Berlin to work there, but also, of course, a large part of the people working there were Germans. So, as most of these people-owned enterprises in the GDR were handed over to the Treuhand, which was a state-owned company that was founded to privatize the state-owned companies in the GDR after the reunification. Also, this enterprise was part of the Treuhand and not sold for a very long time. There was always the hope that somehow this factory could be kept, the graphite production there. And in 1994, it had to be closed. And what followed was the dismantling of this factory site, of course. So you can see some steps how it was done. And this is 2014 now. So more or less, this two huge concrete towers are the symbol for the site in a way, but they are not occupied by any activity in a way, because the main activity on this former site is done at a place which we can see here in the forefront of the two towers, which is called the Dongshuan Center. And the Dongshuan Center is a place that we maybe falsely referred in the seminar always to be run by the Vietnamese community. That's already a point where we could probably arise the question of participation in a way. So you see our group here, the seminar group, we went to this site, and the main task for everyone in the group was to somehow get into this place, to find a gaze, a way in this place with the background from the specific scientific background that they came from, but also like in a personal thing. So the site was observed. We went to the restaurants there, of course. Took walks to the market halls that are on the site, run by the Vietnamese people. But also the scale switched, so very, very focused scale. Leftovers of culture. And then the participants started to somehow work with some of the artifacts that were found there. Try to arrange them, try to do something new with them. We tried to switch the scale, so we went up on these towers to have a different perspective on the site. And then we ended up in the conference room yesterday, and everyone kind of gave an idea what they discovered on site, what they observed, and I have really to say it was really amazing because we formed 6 groups, which was also a very interesting process of participation in a way, and could fill our own seminar. But the main point was at the first half of the day, every one of us was kind of happy with the outcome, even where we all were aware of the fact that we could only scratch on the surface of this particular situation. But then at a very certain point, we got into a huge discussion, and that was the point where where at least someone in the group asked for action. Action, in this case, in the form of design, where some architects, as I'm an architect, were involved in the group. And then, of course, it was the discussion was about the point: how can we intervene in this place after just being there for one afternoon? Can we even intervene after 30 days, 60 days? What time do we need to know that place? And to give you a short idea why I think that participatory governance is probably a driving force behind this, is that I think that a lot of the people wanted to take agency for the Vietnamese community there at some point, where we don't know a thing about, and I don't think it's a very participatory, organized community in a way. The interesting endpoint last night, to come to the end, was that we found out that this community that some of us wanted to take agency for already decided to design themselves and feature like huge projects on development on their website in a way. So I just wanted to put this as a case study now also for our discussion.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Tobias, and now it's Christoph, right?
Yeah,
you have your microphone, right?
Yeah, I have my own microphone, I think, yes. I come from a, I think, different background in a way, because I haven't been here at the campus for the last couple of days, and this is my first encounter with the subject actually, and I've been asked to reflect on, what does participatory governance mean from my background. I work at the German Agency for International Cooperation, GIZ. We're a government-owned enterprise, and we implement development projects in developing and emerging countries. And for us, the term is very important, and I'm actually quite happy that the term made it into this forum, because I was told that there was a big discussion whether it should actually be a separate term or not, or whether it actually falls together with agency or is just fine to talk about agency. And when I was in the agency group just before this session, somebody asked towards the end, well, I would be interested to understand, how do I become an agent actually? Like, what gives me agency? And I thought this was a very nice question leading over into participatory governance, because in my mind it immediately popped up, well, through a governance process that is participatory, that gives you voice, you actually have the chance to become an agent. Meaning an agent, somebody who has some power of influence, some way of making him or herself heard. For the work that we are doing, it is very important, because we we believe that change processes for more sustainable development cannot be prescribed or cannot be decided by only one institution, like be it now a government or be it a big multilateral organization, but it actually requires the working together of different actors. One example of this is, for example, you have this product here, lemonade, that is available here. It's a very fair trade product, and so I want to use this example maybe to make my point, which is that in producing this product is a rather complex process. This one here is made out of, I think, organic oranges. And so the question is, if we think about a complex system that we are working or that we are living in, and we assume that it is getting more and more complex all the time, and with complexity, I mean, I don't know what they are talking over there in the other forum, I mean that you cannot say what effect your action will have within a system, but that it can go in various ways, and the individual is not able to actually predict his or her actions. So the question you could ask is, if I buy a bottle of lemonade, what kind of effect does this actually have on the orange farmer in Brazil? Because maybe you are concerned about the well-being of smallholders in poor regions of Brazil or anywhere else in the world. GIZ is, so that's why I take this example. And to have some idea or some process of making this connection in a complex supply chain is, for example, the development of a standard, of a sustainability standard. Lemonade uses the fair trade process, which is a standard that was developed by the Fair Trade Labeling Organization. And the development of a standard is a very participatory governance process, because you try to bring all the perspectives of stakeholders, so these people who are in some way affected by this, into the development of a behavioral norm. And why do they do that? Because they know that it needs a certain degree of ownership, a certain degree of acceptance of the individual behavioral norms that are prescribed in the standard, which, if they are not existent, then the standard is effectively not working. And I think it's an interesting term also, because it's, I think, one of the few terms here that has two words in it, and namely participatory governance. And when we distinguish governance from government, it is clear that we are talking here about something that is more of a process than of a strict condensed body that makes decisions. But the adjective participatory also gives a normative element to this. And this means that we have a maximum, or at least in my understanding, a maximum participation in a certain governance process. And I think this is a useful way of limiting governance or further describing governance, for the reason that the more people who are involved in a decision-making process, the more stable the decision may be. And in the end, a more stable decision will then lead to a situation where we have less conflict over what has been decided. But it is definitely also a more cumbersome process. But to close, I think for us it's a very important term, and it's not so really a question, do we have it or do we need it? We're actually trying to, or we already are living it to a degree. And one last point, I think, with regards to what does it mean for a curriculum for the Anthropocene, I think there are certain capacities that are needed for people to be able to manage participatory governance processes. And one of these capacities is to work well under situations that are unclear, that are ambiguous, and to try to navigate through such situations, because you cannot really make an either-or decision anymore if you have 20 stakeholders in the room, but you try to make decisions based on uncertainty. And for this, I think we need different skills and competencies, especially also for the people that are taking on, at some point, leadership positions in whatever organization. So I think that would be an interesting component of such a curriculum.